But let us talk about the BBC, because they are having a horrible day. And Mark Borokowski is here, PR guru to the stars, a man who knows a thing or two about broadcasting, about image. Mark, a very good afternoon to you.
Hi there, Mike.
Nice to see you. I want to talk about the BBC having a rather bad day today. I mean, they haven't had a great year, to be honest, but they found out they've lost 1 million listeners from Radio 2 after rather unceremoniously dumping Ken Bruce, who seems to have taken most of them with him, along with the game that he invented, which they've also lost. They're losing hand over fist in all sorts of places, like Radio 5 Live, Today programme, Radio 4's losing 5%. They've also looked like there's a change, isn't there, about the way the media is viewed and the way that television is watched. It also looks like, you know, traditional television like BBC and ITV is kind of losing listeners as well. And in addition to which, they've had to apologise to the Dambusters.
Well, look, it's a disruptive broadcasting sort of world at the moment. I mean, there is so much choice.
Tell me about it.
Not just in terms... Look, here you are, Mike.
Here I am disrupting it all.
Yeah, no, so, you know, people can actually find what they're looking for by going to channels that sort of reflect what they want to hear. The BBC have a very specific position at the moment. Look, they're fighting loads of battles, particularly around the licence fee at the moment, and whether that's viable or not. But, you know, you've got so many choices. You've got Netflix, you've got Apple, you've got Sky, you've got Talk... And also, let's not forget podcasts. Let's not forget, it's partly where newspapers, print is failing. You know, I rarely see anybody on the tube these days or on public transport reading a newspaper. It was full of them because people can actually download the entertainment and choose what they want to see. So therefore, as a product, you've got to be good. You've got to go beyond what you've delivered. And when there was, you know, a couple of channels, 3 channels to choose from, you own the waves and you attract the best talent. Now it's very difficult to attract the best talent. And in fairness, whenever the BBC lands a personality, everybody's focusing on the fee they're paying. So they are beaten up left, right and centre. And it must be the world's most difficult job to be Tim Davie. And I have some empathy with him because he's getting it from all sides. But you are leading an organisation that has to deliver. And there are some great products out there, but it's not enough to engage people and change. When you take someone like Ken Bruce off the air, it's going to take a while for anybody to get back, where people are just not turning onto it and going somewhere else. Because
I mean, one of the interesting things, and I've found this on this show, and this is my opportunity to say that news broadcasting in the radars, by the way, this week have done rather well. Another record for news broadcasting. We've got 6.4 million listeners across TalkSport, Virgin, Talk Radio, Times Radio. Weekly reach up 9.1%. And I think the reason for that, and a lot of people coming to TalkTV as well, because they're fed up with the BBC. They're fed up with the message. They're fed up with, you know, what they get kind of handed as the news that they have to digest. Because I want to show you this clip, and it is, of course, of Sally Nugent making her famous, or shall we say infamous, quote about Dambusters. Hopefully. No, maybe not.
Still to come here on Breakfast. 80 years after 19 Lancaster bombers took part in the infamous Dambusters raids, tonight a special anniversary flypast.
I mean, people just went, what on earth is she talking about? You know, it wasn't infamous. You can call it many things, and you can even have a debate about whether some things that happened during the war were difficult. But the Dambusters raid was not infamous by any stretch of the imagination, and only the BBC could have come up with that.
Well, I think it's down to the quality of the presenter and the language you use. Words are very powerful now. Words can be seized on and can travel around the globe 3 or 4 times even before you make a cup of tea. And therefore, you've got to be on your guard, because if you slip, people are going to descend on you. I think she probably didn't know the usage of the word infamous.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things they tried to use as a defence, that, you know, infamous could be used to mean many things. Well, not in my book, and not in anybody else's book. And also it was repeated by Jermaine Jenis later on. I'm not going to bother showing you that clip, but later on in the day, he also used the word infamous to describe the Dambusters. So clearly it was coming from somebody writing a script, and people were being told to write
it comes by the quality of who they have anchoring and who they have presenting. I mean, Janine James was a mediocre football player, and he's a mediocre broadcaster.
Yeah, and bizarrely, he was presenting the One show, which is not about football.
Well, indeed, he's not a bad pundit.
And Sally Nugent was a sports presenter, wasn't she?
Well, this is a problem. The BBC have got to fit around a cloth. They've got to sort of cut their cloth accordingly, and they don't have the budgets because, as I said,
you must be joking. I mean, they've got hundreds of people making hundreds of thousands of pounds. I mean, they've got Nick Robinson, right, who makes somewhere close to 300 grand a year, presenting the Today programme in the morning, which has lost 5% of its listeners, and he says. In an interview this week, he's never met anyone who wants a UK version of Fox News. Well, that's not surprising. Although Kevin O'Sullivan said he's met him, so he's wrong about that.
Yes, no, look, don't put me off with great gags. But look, the bottom line is that it's a competitive world, and therefore you aren't going to land the talent you once were able to land because you were the sole place to go alongside ITV to get your contract. Yeah. And you can now get yourself a fairly good income by becoming, an influencer on YouTube, as we've seen. Yeah. Younger people are not coming through. Agents still sort of wield the power and sometimes push people forward because they've got somebody that the channel actually wants, and they say, well, if you want them, you've got to do a deal over this. There's all that that bartering going on at the moment, but it's down to quality. I mean, they can still do it. I mean, I just watched that Sixth Commandment program that with Tim Spall. We can produce great drama. We can. But if you look at a lot of the entertainment formats, Strictly, still loved, but it's, how old is it? 15 years old.
It's past its sell-by date, isn't it?
To create new compelling formats, and if you've got a structure where you're minding your manners, making sure the T's are crossed properly, the I's are dotted, you become paralyzed by actually you're not being bold enough to make sort of decisions. The BBC lost that ability to be bold, and if you're a commercials channel, you've got to keep the advertisers happy as well. So there's a fear running through this, leading to sort of bad decisions, sometimes mediocre talent who are pretty good but not good enough when there's other competition out there that's better that people want.
Well, you've got to argue, certainly when it comes to Radio 2, who have had a disastrous last few years. They've lost Chris Evans, they've lost Vanessa Feltz, they've lost Graham Norton, they got rid of Ken Bruce. All of the people they brought in to supplant them have been worse. And people have just turned off in their droves because they've gone, well, hang on, you get rid of these people because they're too old, and then you're hiring people who are nearly 50. It's not as if you're appealing to a younger market. I mean, who do they think they're appealing to on Radio 2? By coincidence, of course, everybody apart from Ken Bruce you can hear in this building, which is why, things are changing here. But in the end, the BBC have always had this horrible habit of using all the same people. So whenever they come up with a new sort of idea for a documentary series, who should we get? Maybe we get Stephen Fry to voice it, or maybe another one for Attenborough. They're not encouraging sort of younger presenters to come through.
Well, that's a problem. That's a paralysis of fear and not being able to take a risk. It's a very conservative business where you're looking for familiarity. I know it's true that audiences want familiarity. Launching a new star, a new format is a massive risk, and everybody will descend on the BBC if it fails. So their sense of failure is quite profound. Again, an infamous remark such as this leads to the next stage of criticism. So I think that we are seeing a whole different world, and the question is, the BBC don't spend any time promoting what they're good about. For me, what I think is depressing about the BBC is a whole swathe of cuts in local broadcasting. Local people getting local news, for an audience that perhaps is perhaps not as young. But still they have to serve those sort of people. There's some really good broadcasters, really good journalists.
No, I accept that, but equally, they've got too many of them. They've got something like 61 different local BBC outlets, right? And in some of them, they're way too much of a muchness in terms of... Yeah, but I mean, you don't need sort of BBC Surrey, BBC Kent and BBC Sussex. You could have one station that covered those three counties quite easily. And the trouble is, yes, I agree with you, that's kind of maybe the thing they should be doing, but they do way too much. And I don't think they can carry on in their current form for much longer.
No, I think that's true, and I'm not against the fact that things have to be looked at, the cost effectiveness of sort of things, but you can make cuts, but don't replace it with something that's worse.
No.
To sort of tick a box. And I think the Today program's a classic case where it doesn't have a position anymore, and they've got really sort of mediocre anchors on it, which you and
I couldn't possibly comment.
You know, but the other
mediocre anchors indeed.
But
I'll make the jokes.
But the other side of things, Mike, is it does take things to bed down. You know, Ken Bruce wasn't warmly welcomed when he took over from Terry Wogan, as I remember it. And
well, no, because that is the way of things. I always say to people, you know, when I first got into the radio business, you know, the first thing that happens is you do a show and everyone goes, "Where's that guy that used to do the show? You're rubbish," you know. And then for a while, they then sort of take a while to get to know you and get to like you. And then after a while, they get to like you for a very short time. And then after a while, they say, "You're rubbish. Why don't you get lost?" You know, and that's kind of the cycle of the world of radio. That's the way it is. But Ken Bruce was a real asset to Radio 2. And it was the sort of numbnuts management that regarded him as too old. And now look what they've done.
Well, it's the ageism factor all the time when you're looking for a new audience. The problem BBC have is actually when you're looking for a new audience, they're not necessarily going to consume it on the channel because they've got elsewhere to find something that they want. And therefore, you lose them. You lose a traditional audience who say, well, you don't want us, we'll go and find where Ken Bruce is, very easily found. And that's where they feel comfortable at home with, leaving a massive gap for other people who maybe don't want to follow Ken Bruce, but discover something else whilst he's away. And they buy into an hour worth of program, and then they'll pick up a podcast, or they'll go for an audible book, or they'll watch a streaming program, they download another time, or click onto Spotify. There is so much competition for ears and for attention at the moment, and it is a natural progression that things will change, and the state of the nation's broadcaster undoubtedly will change over the next few years.